Tony Blair has accused Jeremy Corbyn of being the guy with a placard, representing the politics of protest, unlike him, who he says represents the politics of power. What do you say?
I think it's nonsensical to say that Jeremy Corbyn's leadership is the leadership of political protest. If you look at what the Labour opposition has achieved under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, we've forced through active, meaningful opposition U-turns on a whole host of things. For example, U-turns on tax credit cuts, which would have cost 3 million families across the UK £1,000 a year.
Was that not with the help of Tory rebels?
It was a U-turn also on Sunday trading, a U-turn on a tax, the money received by people living with disabilities, a U-turn on some of the more draconian elements of the trade union bill. So that's real opposition. It's not the politics of protest whatsoever.
Right. What are the other tough decisions that Jeremy Corbyn has taken as leader? Tough decisions that perhaps weren't generally in line with what he has protested about in the past?
Well, a tough decision that Jeremy Corbyn took as leader, just one example, was to give a free vote to Labour MPs on the question of whether or not to support David Cameron's bombing of Syria.
Was that a tough decision on leadership, or did that actually explicitly underline what Tony Blair has said, show no leadership?
It was the right thing to do, and Jeremy Corbyn, by persuasion, not by forcing people, persuaded the vast majority of Labour MPs to agree with him that bombing Syria wasn't in the interests of the Syrian people or British security.
Who made the roundup speech on behalf of the Labour Party and the opposition? Hilary Benn, who contradicted precisely Jeremy Corbyn's position.
And 66 Labour MPs were persuaded by the case to back Cameron's plan to bomb Syria, the plan that Tony Blair backed, and 4 times that number of Labour MPs were persuaded by Jeremy Corbyn's leadership on that very issue.
And on Trident?
On Trident, Jeremy Corbyn's always been clear and consistent on that. But I do think we need to take with a pinch of salt Tony Blair's comments. The reason being that one of the great lessons of New Labour, one of the great truths that Tony Blair and others spoke about, was the need to always remain with the modern world and to update and adapt to current situations. And just as what worked in 1974 wouldn't work in 1997, so what worked in 1997 doesn't work in 2016 whatsoever.
Right, so you think he's out of touch and he is in a world that's now past and gone?
Well, I think that Tony Blair was shown to be out of touch in his calls to back David Cameron's plan to bomb Syria, because only 66 Labour MPs supported Tony Blair's analysis on that. I think what's happened to Tony Blair is a real shame. Tony Blair was clearly one of the most able political communicators
and won 3
of
elections.
His or any generation whatsoever. The sad truth is, both through the disastrous, immoral war in Iraq and through his chasing of money all around the globe since he retired as Prime Minister, he's lost the trust and respect of lots of British people who had trust and respect for him previously.
Although he did
win
an election after the Iraq war, didn't he?
Labour won 3 elections with Tony Blair
and one
as
of them
leader.
After the Iraq war.
That's true, but if we ask people out there what they think of Tony Blair, then I think that many people see him as symbolic of the loss of trust in our political class, unfortunately.
Right, and on that basis, then, you agree with Jeremy Corbyn that the war in Iraq was illegal?
I believe that the war in Iraq was immoral and illegal, and we'll see what the Chilcot inquiry says on the 6th of July. So should Tony Blair, well, the logic of that is you feel that Tony Blair should face some sort of tribunal or charges for that? I believe that the war in Iraq was immoral and illegal. And should Tony Blair face charges? I wait to see what happens in 2 weeks, just 2 weeks away, the Chilcot inquiry. And if the Chilcot inquiry says that it was an illegal war, and if therefore legal action is required, then of course legal action will be required. Right, so you do support the idea that he should face charges, the former Labour leader? No, I wait to see what the Chilcot inquiry says, but I tell you what my belief is: it was an immoral and illegal war. Right, Andrew, I mean, on that basis, if you take the logic that it was an immoral and illegal war, but if you follow that logic, then surely he would face charges on that basis.
Yes, of course he would. Yes. And the idea of putting up a former Prime Minister on war crime charges, I think, is abhorrent, not least because of the House of Commons voted for that war. And that means that it wasn't illegal. When the House of Commons and the House of Lords support something, then it's legal, in my view. Also, in question of immorality, they were overthrowing a vicious fascist dictator. That's not ever immoral. Right, and even Anne Clwyd yesterday said in PMQs that Chilcot will be discredited if it doesn't accept that Tony Blair honestly and genuinely believed that his actions were the right thing to do at the time. And to take Andrew Roberts' point, that obviously David Cameron and most of the cabinet supported that war in Iraq. Well, that was a different cabinet, a different Labour Party, different leadership. But Andrew at the time was on record as saying he looked forward to all the weapons of mass destruction being found.
as we know, they weren't found.
No, of course, because
it was a false premise.
Like the KGB, like the Chinese, like obviously the CIA and MI5, everybody thought he had them, and we only discovered after the war that he didn't.
What about sharing platforms with other politicians? I mean, obviously, Tony Blair sharing a platform with the former Conservative Prime Minister John Major, Ed Balls, the former Shadow Chancellor, sharing a platform with the current Chancellor George Osborne. Shouldn't Jeremy Corbyn share a platform with Tony Blair in terms of asking people to remain in the EU?
I think that it's up to Jeremy Corbyn who he shares a platform with.
But shouldn't he? I mean, they're both, you know, one's the former Labour leader, one's the current Labour leader. They're both for Remain.
Labour is united on the question of the European Union, unlike the
Conservatives.
Conservatives.
But not united to share a platform.
Well, Tony Blair was a Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party and leader of the Labour government, did so many good things on Northern Ireland, on the minimum wage, on public service, on so many other things. But I think that Jeremy Corbyn is being successful in putting forward a Labour vision for a European Union, very distinct from the Conservative vision for the European Union.
But my question was, why aren't they sharing a platform?
Well, I don't manage Jeremy Corbyn's diary.
But do you think he should?
Well, I think that I think that people are more disposed to believe